The day the government stole time. The secret history of the American clock. Everything you know about the time on your phone right now is a complete and total fabrication designed by corporations to control your life. The United States government didn't just change the clocks, they committed the greatest heist in human history by literally stealing the sun from every single American citizen. But the most disturbing part isn't even the change itself. It's the secret reason why one specific city refused to obey, leading to a catastrophe that nearly wiped them off the map. I'm going to reveal exactly what happened to that city and why their rebellion failed later in this video. Think about your day for a second. You wake up at 7 a.m., you're at work by 9, and you eat lunch at noon. It feels natural, right? It feels like a law of physics. But less than 150 years ago, that version of time didn't exist. In fact, if you traveled from New York to Washington, D.C. in the mid-1800s, you'd have to reset your watch 5 different times just to keep up. This was a world where time moved slower, people lived by the light, and nobody, literally nobody, agreed on what noon actually meant. Before 1883, the United States was a chaotic mess of local times. Every single town, from the tiniest village in Maine to the booming streets of San Francisco, set its own clock based on the sun. When the sun was at its highest point in the sky, directly above your town square, it was noon. Period. That's it. It sounds simple, right? It sounds poetic. But here's the problem. The sun doesn't hit the high point at the same time in 2 different places. If it was exactly 12 p.m. in New York City, it was 11:58 in Newark. It was 11:48 in Philadelphia. It was 11:30 in Cleveland. There were over 300 different local times across the United States. Imagine trying to live like that today. You'd call your friend in the next town over to meet for coffee at 2, and you'd arrive 20 minutes early or 30 minutes late because your noon was different from theirs. People didn't care back then because life moved at the speed of a horse. If it took you 3 days to travel 50 miles, who cares if you're off by 10 minutes? But then, everything changed. The Iron Horse arrived. The railroads started stretching their tracks across the continent like a giant metallic spiderweb, and suddenly the time chaos became a death trap. You see, the railroads had a massive problem. They were trying to run a high-speed transportation network on a planet that couldn't agree on what time it was. A train conductor leaving Chicago would be looking at a clock set to Chicago time, but the station he was heading toward was set to its own local time. And the passengers? They were all carrying pocket watches set to the time of whatever town they just left. At one point, the Pennsylvania Railroad was using 5 different time standards just to keep their own trains from smashing into each other. It was pure, unadulterated insanity. There were time balls dropping from buildings and noon guns firing in city centers, all trying to tell people when to reset their watches, but nobody could keep up. The confusion didn't just cause delays, it caused blood. Dozens of people died in horrific train wrecks because 2 engineers thought they were on the same track at different times. Something had to give. The corporations were losing money, and the public was losing lives. So in October of 1883, a group of powerful railroad executives met in a secret room in Chicago. They didn't ask the president, they didn't ask Congress, they didn't ask the American people. They simply looked at a map and decided to chop the United States into 4 distinct slices. They invented the time zones we use today. They decided on November 18, 1883, time as Americans knew it would simply end. They called it the Day of 2 Noons. Try to imagine the sheer panic this caused. On that Sunday in November, the entire country was told that when the sun hit its peak, it wasn't noon anymore. In some places, they had to stop their clocks for 16 minutes to let the standard time catch up. In other places, they had to jump forward. People went into the streets in a frenzy. This wasn't just a scheduling change, it felt like an assault on reality itself. Religious leaders were screaming from the pulpits. They claimed that the railroads were playing God. They argued that solar time was God's time and railroad time was the work of the devil. One preacher in Tennessee famously yelled that the government was trying to change the very laws of the universe. To the average farmer, the idea that a group of businessmen in Chicago could tell the sun when to be at its peak was insane. It was a corporate takeover of the sky. But the railroads didn't care. They switched the clocks anyway. And for most of the country, the convenience eventually won out, but not for everyone. You might be thinking, surely the government stepped in to help. No. The US government didn't actually pass a law making standard time official until 1918. For 35 years, the entire country was running on a suggestion made by railroad companies. It was the ultimate corporate power move. They forced the world to move at their pace, and we just went along with it. But remember that city I mentioned, the one that fought back? That city was Detroit, Michigan. While the rest of the country surrendered to the railroad's new time, the people of Detroit looked at their clocks and said, absolutely not. The mayor of Detroit at the time was a man named Christopher Gooley, and he was a local time fanatic. He insisted that Detroit stay on sun time, which was about 28 minutes faster than the new standard time. For years, Detroit was a temporal island. If you stepped off a train in Detroit, you were stepping into a different dimension. Businesses were confused, schools didn't know when to open, banks were out of sync with the rest of the world. It was a nightmare of epic proportions. The city council tried to vote for standard time over and over again, but the people refused. They felt that by holding on to their local time, they were holding on to their freedom. But the time war in Detroit reached a breaking point. Because they were out of sync with the rest of the world, accidents started happening. Deliveries were missed, contracts were voided, and the city's economy began to crumble. The slower life they were trying to protect was being crushed by the high-speed reality of the 20th century. Finally, after years of holding out, the city caved. They realized that you can't fight the clock when the rest of the world has already moved on. We live in a world governed by those 4 slices of time created in a smoky room in 1883. We think we're following the rhythm of nature, but we're actually following the rhythm of a 19th century train schedule. We traded the natural flow of the sun for the artificial precision of a machine. Time moved slower back then because it belonged to the people. Today, it belongs to the grid. Every time you look at your watch, you're looking at the ghost of a corporate decision made over a century ago. The sun hasn't changed, but we have. We've become obsessed with every second, every millisecond, forgetting that there was once a time when noon was just a feeling in the air and not a digit on a screen. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and make sure you're never left behind in the gears of history, you know what to do. Join the top 1% of viewers who actually know the truth by hitting that subscribe button right now. Don't let your time run out.